Welcome to another edition of Teach the Geek interviews. My name is Neil Thompson. I am the founder of Teach the Geek. I work with technical professionals so they can present more effectively, especially in front of non-technical audiences. And if you want to learn more about that, you can go to teachthegeek.com. Again, that's teachthegeek.com. Today, my guest is Nick Schmidt, and he is a technology leader who has scaled businesses across renewable energy, defense, aviation, manufacturing, and enterprise software. And as a CTO, he's built high-performing teams and architected AI-driven and enterprise-scale systems that turn complex ideas into measurable business results. And in our conversation, we'll dive into the communication challenges between technical and business teams, how technical professionals can gain greater influence, and what organizations can do to help their technical talent become stronger communicators. Welcome to Teach the Geek interviews, Nick.
Thanks for having me.
First question. Where do you see technical and non-technical or technical and business teams most often have miscommunication issues?
I think engineers by nature are curious and very detail oriented. And I think a lot of times technical folks can get kind of wrapped around the axle about the technology or the mechanism of delivery or what code base is going to be programmed in and things like that. And most of the time, the business shouldn't care about how you deliver that function or that feature. And so I think a lot of times technical people have a bad habit of getting focused on what they're comfortable with, which is obviously the technology, but not the business objective or the business needs. And so oftentimes I'll see those parties talking past each other and maybe not understanding the nuance of what each one is saying.
I fully agree with you, Nick, and I'm a bit embarrassed to say that I was a part of that problem. In fact, when I started Teach the Geek, it was all based on my own struggles. I had to give presentations. I was working as a product development engineer, and I had to give presentations in front of management on project status on the project I was working on. And those first few presentations, Nick, were rough at best. And because what I would end up doing is get it up there in front of them. And just like you said, being enamored with all of what I thought was interesting and cool, but
Yeah,
that wasn't really helping them make decisions as to whether this project could or should move forward or not. And I eventually got my wake up call because after a few months, my project got canceled.
yeah,
And when that happened, that really was the catalyst that I needed to think that communicating in front of these people is probably something I should focus on as opposed to getting up there and reading slides and trying to get out there as quickly as possible. Because what ended up happening is I wouldn't get out there quickly. I'd get a whole bunch of questions afterwards that I thought
sure.
I'd answered during the presentation, but you would have thought I would have gotten the hint after that first presentation, but I didn't. Not it wasn't until my project got canceled. I would hope people wouldn't have to go through what I had to go through.
I when I'm mentoring younger kind of up and coming engineers, I always try to focus on two things with them. Like number one, who are you? What is the role you're playing? What is your elevator pitch of you as an engineer and as a person to this business? Making sure it's concise to the point and hits on the main topics that will give you that initial credibility for the meeting. And the second part is every deck has a message. And so the deck is not there for the sake of having 30 charts, a Gantt chart here, a Gantt chart there. The deck is to convey a message. And so what is the message and what is the action we're hoping to come from this? And then using those as guiding principles for the meeting itself. I think that goes a long way in making sure that engineers get focused on what they need to say and what message they actually need to get across.
I think that's really smart, Nick. And the idea that a slide needs to have a message because it talks to relevance. And I
Mhm.
think in a lot of instances, I know for myself, and I suspect for others, other technical people, we weren't really thinking about how it's relevant to them. We're thinking
Right.
about why what we want to speak about and what we
Yeah.
think is important. And as I said earlier, this whole idea of we need to present information that is useful to these people that we're speaking to so they can make better decisions. I mean, as I said, I had to give these presentations in front of management. And we're talking CEO, CTO, CMO. I mean, they don't need to know all the technical jargon. They don't need to know all the technical details. I mean, I'm sure there's more than enough that they have to go through in a day than listen to me talk about the technical details of my one project. And one thing I
Yeah.
also failed to mention is that when I was giving those presentations, I wasn't the only person giving those presentations. It was a day-long affair. This is
Yeah.
so they had multiple engineers coming in to speak about their particular project. Can you imagine all of us talking about the technical details of our projects and then having to now figure out which project to prioritize? Like I, looking back on it now, it seems so foolish to be to even think about it, but it's like, what was I thinking?
It's a shortcoming that we all deal with. When we were building a startup a few years ago, the message was not we need technology. The technology is just an enabler. Like, what's the business objective? Technology is going to solve it. And focusing on I can do X, it's going to deliver Y, which is important to the business. Like this is the thing that you need to focus on. I think also just being dispassionate with data. Risks and issues are very valuable because that's how most leaders think. This is a risk, it's something I need to mitigate, or this is an issue, it's already happening. Holy smokes, I need to take care of it. And so when you can come to the table and present it in that type of mindset, I think it helps business leaders make the proper decisions. And you're arming them with the data that's important to them, not you programmed this in Python and it's running in a CNCF container environment. Like that stuff's just never going to be relevant for that.
Yeah, I mean, just looking back on my time working in product development, I never thought about where the money came from, Nick. I just knew, well, I knew that every other week money ended up in my bank account.
Yeah.
I never thought about where it came from. And that we had a whole sales team that was selling these products that we were working on. And they had to sell a whole lot of those products to be able to support the business and pay all our salaries and keep all of us from having jobs. But
Yeah.
that was never something I thought about at all.
And I think that's a breakdown between engineers and sales. And I think there's this constant, maybe a little bit of a conflict. Sales wants 10 million features so I can sell it. And if they don't have that one, they won't be successful. And I see the inverse a lot too, is something that seems so incredibly simple to them is super complex now. And I see a lot now with AI, like, well, I can just toss that in Claude Code or OpenAI, and it's going to take care of that for me. And so I think having a mutual respect and empathy, I think so much of that is just a breakdown in relationships and siloing of an organization. So the more you can bring those parties together to better understand how those things work. And I highly recommend to tech leaders, like, see if you can get some of your engineers on a sales call. Maybe they can just be in the room and listening in. Let them understand what the customer's asking for and how a customer's thinking about it. And I think that goes a long way in helping refine the type of engineering solution that you'll deliver, knowing what the customer is asking for.
I fully agree with what you're saying, Nick. And you mentioned the word empathy. And it's a word that I come back to quite a bit because when I think about empathy, I think about myself before and after I became a technical person. Once
Yeah.
we become this technical person, we communicate in a way and we just assume that other people will understand what we now know. But we didn't always know what we now know. And I think a lot of
Mhm.
us we forget that, especially the further on you get in your working life.
Yeah.
You likely had to go to school, you got this technical degree, and based on that, you then get this technical role within an organization, and over time you gain more and more skills in that technical realm. And now we have to give presentations or communicate with people who didn't do any of that. And we
Yeah.
just assume that they should be able to understand us, but our former selves couldn't have understood us.
Yeah. That empathy, there's almost like this badge of honor that says, "Oh, I've coded this many things, or I built this," and I feel like as we get high on our horses, we forget that technology was at the beginning for many of us this mystery, and how excited we would get to dig into those ones and zeros and understand how this new thing worked, and get excited about reverse engineering it in our free time, and that wonder, that kind of like that childlike wonder, if you can remember that that's how you felt, you can be empathetic to people who don't understand that. And if you need any proof point in that, go look at the CFO's books and understand how reporting and financial regulatory things work, and your eyes will gloss over. But for them, that was their childlike moment. In many cases, they're passionate about it, and I think we could all do a little bit better to find what makes people tick and what they're passionate about. And I like to talk to people who are excited about anything, as long as they're excited about it. And knowing that they could probably teach me something, and going into any conversation and engagement with that mindset, I think goes a long way.
Yeah, I agree with you there, Nick, as well. I've been in many situations, and I suspect others have as well, where you have to give a presentation as a technical person. But there's a bunch of different types of people in the audience. There could be business people, there could be technical people, there could be everybody in between. What are your thoughts on how to address a mixed audience?
First thing before you go in that meeting is know who owns the decision authority. Know who's important. Coming from the kind of the military and intelligence space, building up that dossier on who's attending the meeting, why are they there, what's their purpose, where do they fit within the team and the management structure. I think that's important because quite often the technical person is, the horse whisperer of what's going on the other side of the house when they sit down with the CEO, and they're going to look for that gut check. And so just knowing the room, it goes such a long way before you actually even get up in front of everyone and start talking. And then using that to guide your approach to the conversation. There's a great sales guy I've worked with in the past who would go and tear through all of the financial disclosures and public statements for companies and then build that into the deck. Oh, 2 years ago, you guys mentioned this and that was important to you, and here's how I'll fix that. And I always kind of keyed in on it. I thought that was a really interesting way to look at it, is where what's the pre-research? The meeting started well before you stepped into the room if you're playing that game correctly.
Yeah. I think you're right about that, Nick. If you're able to persuade the whisperer, then you can get the decision maker because the decision maker is influenced by the whisperer. And just figuring out who that person is, I think is really useful. And I think a way to do that, at least what I used to do, is I had to give these presentations in front of management. It was very difficult to get time with them because they're busy people. So I go to
Yeah.
their admins. Their admins know them inside and out. What kind
Yep.
of information do I need to give in this presentation that'd be useful to your boss? And then you could also just based on that figure out who that whisperer is. That
Yeah.
CEO? Do you need to appeal to him directly, or do you need to appeal to the CTO? Because
Yeah.
the CEO is going to basically go along with whatever the CTO says, and I think that's really smart.
Yeah, you gotta know what that room, who's making the calls in the room. And I think something you brought up that's important too is, as with everything in business, it's all a relationship. And so just understanding what makes that person tick, whether it's, she really enjoys the business growth perspective, and so maybe you should tie your message to the growth. But one thing I will say that I see a lot of technical leaders sometimes fall flat on is they walk in with a deck that's 40, 50 slides long because they want to make sure they hit everything. And I'm a big proponent in the backup slides. And it gives you some credibility. Like that question comes up in the room, it's highly technical. Maybe they're trying to kick the tires and see if you know what you're talking about. And you can quickly flip to that backup slide. I think that's important. And then doing read aheads, making sure the deck hits their desk beforehand. They may not read it, but they at least know that you're prepared for that meeting. But going back to just focusing on the message and then having those in backup, I think go a long way in making sure that meeting does not stop and get very quiet when you can't answer a question. So it's better to have it on hand than actually in the deck that you feel necessary to walk through.
Man, have you sat in on one of my presentations, Nick? I don't remember seeing you. That whole idea of having the backup slides, so useful.
Yeah.
Because yes, you're not going to get through 40, 50 slides in the
Yep.
presentation. It's not going to happen. But if someone like some person asks that technical question, you got that technical whiz kid person in the room and they ask that question, you have the slide. Oh, you want to know about that? Oh yeah, I have that for you. I got
Yeah.
a slide for that.
Yeah.
And yeah, it helps to show that competence because yes, I'm putting together a presentation that's going to be understandable to the people who are making decisions. However, if there are questions that I think could be perhaps above the heads of a lot of the people in the room, I'm going to leave those out, but I'm going to have them ready in the event
Yep.
that somebody asks the question. I'm going to be ready. I don't have to get ready.
I I think too, sometimes we get very regimental, dogmatic almost, that we must start with slide one and then we must go to slide two and we must read those 6 bullet points and show this chart. And I think being a little bit more flexible, dancing on your toes a little bit, being able to show the room that you will ebb and flow with the conversation, but also having a little bit of rigor to say, that's a great topic. Let's take that offline. It sounds like we really want to do a deep dive on this one specific component. I don't want the meeting to get overran or rabbit holes or anything like that. So let's take that offline and I'll reach out one-on-one and we can talk through that. I think there's also that management of the room and understanding the conversation flow. It's really important as you get into tech leadership.
Yeah, I think you're right about that too, Nick. And because meetings can get derailed by that one or two people that keep asking these questions that are above the scope of what the
Yeah.
meeting was supposed to be. And you need to be, as you mentioned, you need to be able to dance. Don't have two left feet.
Yeah.
I think that's smart. In this day and time, especially now, in this day and time, Nick, AI is all the rage. Your CEO is going to go to a conference. He's going to see all these platforms, these initiatives that are AI enabled, and he's going to think to himself, "Well, why isn't our stuff AI enabled? I'm going to go back to my company and say this other company, company X, is doing all this AI stuff, and we're not doing any AI stuff. We're not doing enough of the AI stuff. I want to do more AI stuff." So, as a CTO type, how do you communicate trade-offs to business leaders?
Uh, Buzzwords are a constant struggle, I would say, for sure. Um, it should always come back to business value. What is AI enablement buying your business? And quite often those conversations are cart is so far in front of the horse. Do you have good data? Do you have good processes? Is the tribal knowledge documented? Do we have a good understanding of the handoffs between these various processes? Because throwing an AI agent at something is not necessarily going to fix it, especially if those fundamental structural problems exist. If anything, it's just going to exacerbate the issues as it tries to reverse engineer and discover what the organization is trying to do. And so when I talk about trade-offs with leaders, it's AI enablement. What are you hoping to do? Because I doubt it's like you just want to put an AI bullet somewhere on the website. Chances are you want to deliver something, whether that's cost reductions, accelerated growth, throughput for delivery. And so, okay, so if that's the business objective you're trying to meet, here's the steps we're going to do to get us to that point. But if we don't do these steps, you're setting yourself up for failure. And I see that a lot with the AI conversation is there's this conception that it's a silver bullet. My business is operating off how many memes are there? Like, oh, Jane's spreadsheet is actually the one doing all the finance reporting right now. You have to discover those issues, or the AI is not going to be successful. But getting a business owner to understand that you have to do those fundamentals in order to get there. But there's a ton of great byproducts of that. We have clean data now; it's tagged. Well, now we can do all these forecasts and models that we never could do. Now Jane can take a break; she can take PTO, and the financial reporting will continue forward. But just being able to sequentially show the iterative process to a leader, that's great, boss. I want to deliver that business objective for you. Here's the 10 things that we're going to do and how we're going to structure those into a roadmap. I think that's really important to lay out the message versus just focusing on the technology. As I said, technology is just an enabler. So if you're doing AI for the sake of doing AI, you're not enabling probably what the business needed.
Yeah, and just being able to deliver that message in a tactful way, I'm sure is quite a dance in and of itself.
Yeah.
Nick, I mentioned that I started this podcast and the YouTube channel based on my own struggles communicating with the decision makers, these non-technical decision makers. I'm curious to hear about what you did, if anything, to become a more effective communicator.
I think I was incredibly fortunate. My father was a lector in the Catholic Church and very active. So the person that gets up every Sunday and reads, and he encouraged me very early on to do public speaking. And so reading dense religious texts to a group of people and keeping their attention kind of gave me those human factors that I think I would have not gotten otherwise. He was also him and my mother were very important in getting me into Boy Scouts and understanding what leadership looks like, and how to organize a group of people and deliver success. And then I think lastly, I've just been incredibly thankful for being able to operate and work and have personal connections around the globe. And when you have to communicate to somebody whose first language is not your language, and maybe your language is their second or third or fourth one, it takes on this new dynamic of your word choices and it forces you to simplify your message. It forces you to think about how this will be interpreted and the cultural impacts. And I think that international component and kind of the things that happened as a kid and just being in the military really helped me to branch out how I communicated with people, not necessarily always to the positive. When I went from the military and intelligence world to renewable energy, I spent my entire life working in that space, and so acronyms and chain of command and how we deliver things and after action reports and it those terms had to go out the window. I had to learn a whole new way to talk and communicate with people, but I feel like I was able to lean on some of those things growing up and then just having been a global citizen, if you will, having worked around the globe.
You know, when you were speaking, Nick, it reminded me of a story I once heard. It was a woman who was talking about one of her coworkers, and she said that so often she'd have to repeat herself
Hmm.
whenever she spoke to this person. And she thought the reason he was asking her to repeat anything she said was because he was questioning her competence. And then one day she just decided, so she held this view for months. And this one day that I think she said they were at a conference, and I guess she got I guess enough courage to ask him, why you always ask me to repeat everything to you? And because I said she thought it was because he thought she wasn't that bright. But turns out the reason he was asking is because, as you mentioned, English wasn't his first language.
Hmm.
So a lot of the times he was asking for the repetition just to make sure that he understood what she was saying. And can you imagine if she had never asked him that question, why he was asking her to repeat? She would have continued to think that this person was a bad guy because he didn't think that I deserve where I'm at. I don't deserve this spot, this position. But it turns out it was a completely different reason.
Words are powerful and they can cut through. If I use an acronym from the military and somebody else in the room is military, they're going to immediately know, that guy's background is X, this is what he did. But it also has the capability to alienate everyone else in that room. And so I find too, when you're building a message to give to leadership, is not being so focused on your wording. Um, what changing that message ever so slightly as you go through the deck or as you go through that presentation, and saying the same thing, but maybe saying it in a slightly different way or choosing different words. And especially if you're working with people where English is not their first language, Americans just have a really bad habit of using Americanisms for everything. In sports references, how many baseball references are in corporate America? That's not a sport played in most parts of the other world, and so it's learning how to iterate on your own thinking and choosing different words that will go a long way. Not only if you're doing international work, but just people in a room that aren't necessarily the same people as you or the same background.
Yeah, football references too, or I guess U.S. football references as well. You know, try to get everything to the goal line. It's like, what? What goal line we talking about?
Yeah,
We need more soccer references. That's what we need. We want to
that's
prepare
right.
for
It's
these
World
projects.
Cup.
Indeed, right? Absolutely. So, okay. So then, I'm curious to get your thoughts on this, Nick. There are technical people within an organization, and they see the benefit of improving in their communication skills, especially when it comes to communicating with non-technical audiences, with decision makers. What can an organization do to help these technical people improve those skills?
Number one is realizing that not all engineers want to be people managers or to be in that role. And I think we do a disservice to incredibly smart technical people when we give them one track. That is, if you want to expand your career, if you want to make more money, you have to now become this person. I always really appreciated my time at Boeing, because they had these ideas of tech fellowships. And those people sometimes were not presenters, but they were incredibly in just specific knowledge bases that nobody else in the world had. And they were given that flexibility to not need to go on the management track. With that said, I think there's a lot of benefit for leaders to delegate. And that's tough. The military would say it's the blast radius. So if you have an incredibly big meeting, and you want to delegate, maybe that's not the moment. But just getting people to speak up, getting to know if that's what their goals are. I think if you know somebody wants to explore that space, it makes it a lot easier than thrusting it upon them. But I think organizations should be not bashful about giving people a safe space to give a bad presentation. Um, and I think you can do that gracefully while building up somebody. Don't throw them into the deep side of the pool immediately. But I think also just letting leaders know that there's not an expectation that they have to do every presentation. Um, Going back to our baseball references, you need more times at bat. You need to get up and you need to strike out a few times, and you'll learn those skills that are incredibly difficult to do otherwise.
Yeah, maybe we need some more cricket references as well. We're trying to be international here.
There you go.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. It also comes back to the technical people. If they do get those opportunities to give those bad presentations, they need to be open to the feedback as well. Because a lot of times we can get a little prickly if people are giving us, critiquing whatever we're doing, but you don't get better unless you're willing to hear the good and the bad.
Exactly. Yep. I gave some horrible presentations and had some wonderful mentors that, Nick, let's go on a walk. We need to talk about that.
Wait, once you heard that, you knew what time it was, huh?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's wonderful. This has been a great conversation, Nick. Thank you so much for being a guest. How can people get in touch with you?
I'm very active on my blog, geekyschmidt.com. I'm on Mastodon for you open source type folks. I try to share technical things I'm thinking about and building on LinkedIn. So happy to connect there and follow along. But I try to blend the tech leadership and then just being a naturally geeky guy building stuff. And so, no guarantees. You'll get everything from serial port dumping of Modbus registers to how I feel about AI controls and and things like that. But yeah, any of those places you can connect with me.
Wonderful. Well, everyone, that marks the end of another edition of Teach the Geek interviews. My name is Neil Thompson. I'm the founder of Teach the Geek. I work with technical professionals so they can present more effectively, especially in front of non-technical audiences. And if you want to learn more about that, you can go to teachthegeek.com. Again, that's teachthegeek.com. Until next time, take care and stay safe. Thanks, Nick.
Thanks, Neil.